Hello and welcome back to Commander in General. And oh boy, have I got such a special deck for you today. One that is very near and dear to my heart. Have you ever built a theme deck? Sometime last year, me and my Magic Play group decided that we were each going to try and build a theme deck around a TV show, video game, movie, or book that we really like. If you know me at all, you would know that my favorite game of all time is The Legend of Zelda, specifically the Ocarina of Time. I've played, not all, but most of the Legend of Zelda games, and the Ocarina of Time was the first game I ever completed. And I truly believe that this game has shaped who I am today. It's led me to be curious and search out new adventures and explore and face challenges head on with creative solutions. All this to say it was a pretty easy choice for me. I even made this custom laser cut deck box to store it in. So which card is going to be our hero of time? It's this beautiful card right here. Galea, Kindler of Hope. Galea is a 4/4 for 1 and Bant that reads, Vigilance. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and the big one here, you may cast aura and equipment spells from the top of your library. When you cast an equipment spell this way, it gains, when this equipment enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. My favorite part about Legend of Zelda was that every time you would beat a temple or a new part of the game, you would get a new item that would change the whole way that you played the game and interacted with the world. In my opinion, it's one of the most integral parts of the Zelda experience. So I think that the Voltron strategy embodies not only this, but Galea letting us look at the top card, flavor-wise to me, the whole time aspect of getting to peer into the future and pull things from the future, it fits very well. And lastly, Galea is an elf knight. It couldn't be a better fit. It's just mwah. Chef's kiss. This deck is crammed with iconic items, places, characters, and moments from the series, and it's quite possibly my favorite deck that I have ever built, just for its sentimental value. And it's definitely the most time and effort I've ever put into building a deck, that's for sure. But all this makes me that much more excited to get to share with you guys who have been supporting the absolute crap out of this channel the past few months, so thank you very, very much. If you'd like to support this video and my channel, you like what you see, go ahead and that like button down below and that subscribe button if you want to see more deck techs just like this one. All right, now let's jump in.
Yo, holy shit, he dead!
I know that there are tons of really good Voltron cards that are probably coming to mind right now that you might not see here today. This is not only because I really like to try and build outside the box when I can, but also this deck is really prioritizing flavor. That being said, I didn't want to put a ton of work into this deck and then never want to play it because I prioritized the flavor too much. So the part that took the longest was trying to strike that perfect balance between flavor and also a strong deck. But if you have any good ideas for flavorful additions, let me know down in the comments and maybe I'll do an update. Now, there are many legendary swords in the Legend of Zelda series, but one of the less appreciated cards is the Kokiri Sword. This is the one you first obtain in Kokiri Village before you leave. This Sword of the Forest will keep us ramping and help us to keep on pace as the game goes on. If you didn't notice, I use the Godzilla style titles, so as we're going through this, I think I'm just gonna go with saying the flavor names of the cards, and then if you guys wanna know what the actual one is, you can just read that little title under the regular title. If it doesn't have one of those, then the name has been unchanged. But for when you want to hit really hard, we all know we're going to need something a little bit bigger. Enter the Big Goron Sword. The real one, not the fake one that breaks after just a few swipes. We'll be putting all those lands from the Kokiri Sword to good use with this guy, and big power is going to be essential if we're going to be taking people out of the game with commander damage. We've also got some Majora's Mask representation here with the Great Fairy Sword, which I have tweaked to make fairies instead of spirits. I didn't take many liberties with the actual mechanics of the cards, but this is one of them. Now I'm sure I've got you wondering, then what is the Master Sword? And let me tell you, I mulled this over for pretty much the entire time I was making this deck, and I didn't end up nailing it down until the very end. People were telling me it should be the Black Blade Reforged, but that didn't really feel right to me. The Master Sword isn't just a giant heavy hitter, it's a symbol of light to banish the darkness. So when I found these three cards, I knew I just had to do it. My Master Sword is, drumroll please, Sword of Kuldra, along with Hylian's Shield as the Shield of Kuldra, and the Hero's Tunic / hat as the Helm of Kuldra. The flavor of the exiling on the sword I thought was just perfect. Plus it gives a huge stat buff, and in this deck it would feel awesome to get to pull this card out of the Temple of Time, aka our library, and get to skip that equip cost. The impenetrable Hylian Shield gives the other pieces and our creature indestructible, and the versatile and stylish tunic gives our creature first strike, trample, and haste for a bit of evasion. Trample is especially important in Voltron decks. If you manage to get all of these pieces on Link, you've won the game in my eyes, or at least completed a side quest. And just to be cheeky, I made this card create a Toon Link token instead, just to squeeze him in there. But before the Master Sword even became the Master Sword, where my Skyward Sword fans at, it was the Goddess Sword, which was inhabited by our Skyward companion, Vi. The front side gives creatures double strike and lets us move equipment around, and the back side is a low to the ground piece of decent equipment. Now we're going to have to hit people directly with Link if we want to get people out of the game. And what does Link need to get into hard to reach places? A key, of course. We have our dungeon key, which will give Link Skulk so he can pass through those guards into the princess's courtyard, and when it connects, we get to cycle some cards. And when you connect with the boss key, we get to look at cards equal to the amount of damage we've done on the top of our library and cast one for free. We've also got our big key as a little throwback to the old games, which we're mostly playing for that second ability to be able to make Link unblockable. So we had our dungeon key, but as our dungeon map, we have Expedition Map for a little piece of ramp here, and while we're talking about ramp, we've got a Deku Stick, or a Wanderer's Twig. But not to worry, when this stick breaks, you get to search for a land. Also from the forest, we have Saria, Forest Sage, who makes a decent low-to-the-ground creature to equip to in a pinch as they have hexproof while they're untapped.
Hey, Bloom, listen!
It's another mana dork, our fairy companion Navi. I also put in Tattle and Tail because I always liked them and how they had a bit more personality. Although, whatever did happen to Navi anyways. Skull Kid is also a dork, but he's a dork who stumbled upon the power that, provided the right scenario, could wipe out not only the table, but all of Hyrule. As a little tangent here, I also made the Majora's Mask itself an equipment, but I could have just left the name unchanged. It's Mask of the Schemer, which gives us some card selection and some buffs on power. And guiding us to cheaper equipment, hopefully I'm saying this right, is Kepuro Gebora Soaring Sage, making our historic spells cost one less, which we will have a decent amount of legendary creatures coming later, so that will also be relevant. One of which is the Great Deku Tree, who gives our modified creatures trample, and when modified creatures we control deal damage to a player, we get to search for a land and put it onto the battlefield. Similarly, we have another companion, Midna, Twilly Enchantress, who can either be her own creature, or she can hide in Link's shadow and help us look for some lands. We also have Link's 3 talismans he must seek to enter the temple, the Zora Sapphire, the Goron Ruby, and finally the Kokiri Emerald, which each tap for one of 2 colors. But as for the most powerful mana rock, which combines the power of all 3 colors, well, after the gods had finished their work, they left the world, but not before creating a symbol of their strength, a golden triangle known only as the Triforce. But moving back to some equipment, when you need to fly over your opponent's creatures to land a hit, we'll need the hover boots, which also have the added bonus of giving us Ward 4, which is a whole crapload of ward. If instead we just need a whole lot of strength, we have the Goron's Bracelet, which gets cheaper to equip the more worthy your creature is. Quick note here, I know it's a bit confusing that I changed the borders of some of these cards to match better aesthetically, but I just really wanted them to look nice. The Bunny Hood will keep our creature safe and keep it running top speed towards our opponent's life totals, and Mask of Truth will let us draw and filter some cards if we land a hit. A few pieces of bouncing removal, we have Remote Bomb, or Aether Spell Bomb, which can draw us a card or be a little threat if people are trying to attack us with a big creature, and Boomerang, which bounces a permanent, and is literally just a Magic the Gathering card called Boomerang. Who would have thought?
Not me.
Another way of skipping our equip costs besides Link is the Hammer of Nazan, or Megaton Hammer, which not only equips itself when it ETBs, but lets other equipment do the same. Some more Wind Waker representation, we have Skull Hammer, or Behemoth Sledge, which will give our creatures +2/+2, Trample, and Lifelink. Lifelink? Get it? And to carry all this equipment, we're going to need a strong back, which will make things cheaper to equip and enchant onto our creature, and also gives them +2/+2 for every aura and equipment attached to it. What the hell is this card? Forge Anew not only lets us get our equipment back from the yard, but it also says we can pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost for the first equipment every turn, and that we can equip it instant speed. If we pair this with something like Bunny Hood, it essentially gives our whole board Shroud, since whatever gets targeted, we can just slide the greaves over in response. As another little piece of recursion, we have Unfinished Business, signifying the revival of our hero and the re-equipping of a few main items. As you can see, I've been leaning a lot more on the equipment side of things than the enchantment side, but here are a few good ones I am running. Sticking with the recursion, we have Magic Armor from Twilight Princess, which will let us return any number of aura or equipment cards from the graveyard to the battlefield attached to the enchanted creature. Plus they get +1/+1 for each one attached to it. This card kinda does it all. Another Twilight Princess card, we have Wolf Form, which gives our creature totem armor, +2/+2, and lets us untap all of our lands when we attack, so we can load up our board with even more on a second main phase, or leave some mana untapped to respond with. Since we're talking about Twilight Princess, here is Twilight Mirror, which can let us peer into the future to rearrange our top card, and we can also draw a card if we roll 4. But another really cool way we can use Link's ability is to play enchantments as removal from the top of our library, like Cursed by Twilight, or Kenrith's Transformation, which draws us a card and turns their creature into a 3/3 elk with no abilities. And we can just pretend that it says wolf. As there is a lot of this kind of transformation cursing in Legend of Zelda, it made sense to me flavor-wise that we can lean into this for our removal. So I also added in the Skelechilla's Curse, which turns their creature into an indestructible insect, and Skull Kid's Hex, which turns them into a little Deku scrub. And lastly, our Forest Sage can consume them to become part of the Lost Woods with Saria's Song, or Song of the Dryads. Since we're talking about songs, let's take a look at a few more. We have Zelda's Lullaby, or Song of Inspiration, which lets us grab a couple cards from our graveyard and possibly gain some life. We have Song of Healing, which is a card called Healing Technique. It has Demonstrate, and it gets us a card from our graveyard and will gain us a little bit of life. Song of Storms, or Echo Storm, which lets us make copies of an artifact based on how many times we've played our commander, which I find in Voltron decks, even though we'll have a lot of good options for creatures to put equipment on later, I end up playing my commander a lot, and he ends up dying a lot.
Yo, holy shit, he dead!
But I digress. And you know I obviously had to have the Song of Time, or Time Warp, to take an extra turn. And getting real into the nitty gritty with it, I also put in the inverted Song of Time as Time Reversal, which will give us a new hand of cards. And what are we gonna play all of these songs on? An ocarina, of course. Listen, I know there are other instruments in Magic, but there are admittedly not many. So this is the one I went with. I think it's kind of fun. I mean, how else are we going to get into the Temple of Time? And yes, I did do all the temples. I will admit this is a hard card to use effectively without proliferating, but I couldn't not. It's perfect. I actually did do it once in this deck where it was awesome, so whatever. The way you're really supposed to use this card is by proliferating the counters on it, but people would also want to kill you for it. But obviously we also had to have the Temple of Light, Temple of Shadow, Temple of Spirit, and the Fire, Forest, and Water temples. For some other locations, we have Mazavith as our Lost Woods, Port Town as our Kakariko Village, Sungrass Prairie as Hyrule Field, Overgrown Farmland as Lon Lon Ranch, Buried Ruin as Dompe's Crypt, Command Tower as Termina Clock Tower, Thriving Isle as Outset Island, Rogue's Passage as Gerudo Valley, and this one I really like, Otawara Soaring Sky as Skyloft. But continuing on, we also have Rivendell as the Zora's Domain, which lets us scry, Fabled Passage as Time Gate, Minas Tirith as Hyrule Castle, Inventor's Fair as Castle Town, Roadside Reliquary as an Ancient Shrine, which can draw us a few cards in a pinch, and this one I also really like, Litjara Mirror Lake as Lake Hylia, which creates a copy of a creature you control, which if you'll remember, Link has to fight his shadow self in the water temple located underneath Lake Hylia, which leading into our character section next, I do also have a card for Dark Link, Umbral Duelist, as Clever Impersonator. My maybe board for this deck was huge with all sorts of characters, items, and references. I ended up not being able to fit it all, but a few standouts I want to shout out real quick that I didn't include that I really would have liked to were the King of Hyrule and Tingle, which I thought Kellen, Daring Traveler, would have made a really cool one for since he creates map tokens, but just didn't make sense. If you guys have any other ideas, please let me know down in the comments. Alright, who better to start off with than Danitha as Zelda, Hyrule Luminary. This card is great to equip to, as well as restoring our equipment, just like, spoiler alert, she did with the Master Sword in Tears of the Kingdom, which honest to God was the coolest thing to know that she was just flying up there all that time waiting for us to find her, and all that time the Master Sword was just soaking up the power of an eternal dragon and repairing itself, but also getting stronger. It's just, it's so cool. This moment was also represented earlier with the art on Forge Anew. We also had to incorporate the time skip of it all with Rebecca playing our young Zelda, Hyrule Princess, who will give our artifacts protection from each mana value among artifacts we control. This also got me thinking that this would be cool to play in a Voltron deck where your commander was an artifact creature. Moving on, you know I had to do young Link as well. We have Link Kokori Novice as the new Kellen the Kid, who will benefit us if we play auras or equipment off the top of our library. In the Magic world, Sakashima has 1,000 faces. Now, who walks around the world of Hyrule carrying 1,000 faces? Why, it's the Happy Mask Salesman, of course. This guy actually really scared me as a kid in that one scene where he finds out that you didn't actually get his mask back, even though he was kind of a dumbass for seeking the mask out in the first place. But we're not gonna talk about that. Our lovely skywriting friend Loftwing is here. I really like the flavor on this one, but technically it's the guy riding the bird who's the creature, not the bird that is the creature itself. So unfortunately, Loftwing here is a cat knight, but he's got flying, and whenever Loftwing attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library, and we may put an aura or equipment card from among them onto the battlefield. And if it's an equipment card, we once again get to skip that equip cost. Cauldra is actually going to be making another appearance in a strange twist of flavor as the Guardian Stalker, but if you kill the Stalker, you can harness its tech for parts and equip it to another creature instead. Flavorfully, it gives you the 3 things that the 3 separate pieces of Cauldra gave you separately. As a little baddie, we have an acidic slime as a green choo-choo for some removal for your opponent's artifacts, enchantments, and lands. And as a little bad, we have Pura Chic Savant, who's going to draw some cards for playing equipment and aura. And okay, I'll try to contain myself. Moving on, we have Epona Timeless Steed, who can roam on their own, or we can play a little... and Link can ride them into battle. Also, while equipped, our opponents can't win the game, and we can't lose. Sorry! We have, spoilers again, another Zelda variant with Sheik, Failed Survivor, who's actually once again a Danitha card with great keywords and a little bit of recursion. Rudo is also a great target for our equipment as Cold Eye Selkie, who can draw us a bunch of cards. Stone Hewer Giant is our big Goron. Forge Goliath, who can search our library for, some new weapons and immediately attach them. Don't think I forgot about you, Beetle.
Thank you!
At the beginning of combat on our turn, you may attach any number of auras and equipment from Beetle's shop to a creature you control, which is cool, especially for the auras since usually we can't move those around too easily. But oh no! It's the night of the final day. Stroke of midnight. It's starting to look like we might be out of time. Not since the Great Flood. Flood of tears. Have I seen an evil such as this. And now we must enter the final boss chamber, and oh my f***ing god, it's Ganondorf, the Demon King. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets double strike until end of turn, so he is to be feared. But you dodge, you weave, and you strike through and manage to defeat him. Hooray! But what's this? Another form? Ganon, Final Evil. He has become a great monstrosity who is not only harder to remove, but he makes all of our other creatures harder to remove. He also has this cool ability where he can either grow or shrink a creature, which I think is pretty versatile and pretty fun. But just as he thinks he's got us, we get the Master Sword back. And indeed, this must be our finest hour. We slash into him one last time, sending back the evil from whence it came, vanquishing the Horde, and wiping this timeline entirely. We collect our heart container and return to our original timeline to live out the rest of our days, wandering Hyrule and biding our time for the next evil our hero will face. Thank you so much everyone for tuning in to this very special episode of Commander in General. I know this deck has cards that could be better in some places, and who knows, it probably will change a little bit over time, but overall I'm very happy with how this one came together. I really hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one. I'm currently trying to reach 1K subs, so it would mean a lot if you stuck around. If you want to see the full deck list, it'll be in the description. Also be sure to check out the little bit of flavor text I added on some of the cards for a little more lore and flavor. Let me know if you like this kind of deck tech. It was way more work, so I don't imagine another one anytime soon, but let me know what sorts of theme decks you have or what sorts of decks you'd like to see in the future. Well, everyone, it's been a ride, but I must walk my horse off away into the woods now to find my next journey. But thank you again for watching. This has been Commander in General, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.